At 3:18 in the morning, 8 Iranian speedboats cut through the darkness of the Strait of Hormuz with their transponders off, their radios silent, and one single objective: separate HMS Dragon from the French naval group she was sailing with and make music her stop. They had done this before to Americans, to Europeans. Close approaches, swarming formations, psychological pressure until the foreign warship slowed down, changed course, or made the kind of nervous radio call that Tehran could turn into a propaganda clip by sunrise. It had always worked. Tonight, they picked the wrong ship. The Strait of Hormuz at 3 a.m. doesn't look like a battleground. It looks like nothing. Black water, black sky, the distant glow of Iranian refineries bleeding orange along the northern horizon. Container ships move through like slow ghosts. Their navigation lights are the only color in the dark. HMS Dragon was somewhere in the middle of all that. Nothing. Cutting southeast at 18 music knots. She hadn't entered the strait alone. A French naval group was operating nearby, the frigate FS Provence and 2 support vessels, part of a broader European maritime presence in the Gulf. Dragon had been sailing in loose coordination with them for the past 6 hours, not formally attached, just close enough that anyone watching from the Iranian coastline would see what looked like a coalition formation moving through together. That's exactly what Tehran saw. And that's exactly what Tehran decided to break apart. The plan, as best as British intelligence would later reconstruct it, was straightforward. 8 Iranian Revolutionary Guard fast attack boats would emerge from the coastline at speed, push hard between Dragon and the French group, and use aggressive swarming maneuvers to isolate the British destroyer inside the shipping corridor. Cut her off. Surround her. Force her to slow down or change course. Not a battle. A performance. Cameras rolling, state media ready. Another clip of a Western warship backing down in Iranian waters. Music. They had pulled versions of this off before against Americans, against Europeans. The formula was simple. Come in fast, come in, music, loud, make the other side blink first. At 3:18, the radar operator aboard Dragon, music, looked up from his screen. Multiple surface contacts, northern bearing, no transponders. He paused. They are not slowing down. Commander Ethan Reeves was already standing at the tactical display when the contacts appeared. 8 symbols along the top edge of the screen pushing south at speeds no. Civilian vessel touched at 3 o'clock in the morning. 40 knots, then 50. Spreading into a wide fan formation as they came, the outer boats angling to curve around Dragon's flanks while the center group drove straight at her projected path. Reeves studied the vectors for a few seconds without speaking. The French group was 12 nautical miles northwest. Already the Iranian formation was positioning itself between the two. Exactly as intended. He didn't call the French. He didn't need music, too. Every officer in that operations room already understood what was happening. Iran wasn't interested in the French tonight. The French had been operating in the Gulf long enough that Tehran had calibrated exactly how they'd respond to pressure. Measured, diplomatic, carefully non-escalatory. Britain, they assumed, would do the same. Time to intercept. Reeves said quietly. 7 minutes. He nodded once, clasped both hands behind his back, kept his eyes on the screen. No course change, no speed, music. Reduction, no radio call warning the Iranians off. Just Dragon moving forward in the dark like she hadn't noticed them at all. That silence was a decision. Warships that are uncertain fill the airwaves. Repeated warnings, demands to alter course, tense radio exchanges that get recorded and replayed at press conferences. It's almost a reflex. Music, when something threatens, you talk at it. You establish communication. You demonstrate restraint for whoever might be watching. Reeves had watched enough of these incidents play out to understand what those radio calls actually communicated. Music, anxiety, hesitation, an opening. He gave them nothing. Inside the Iranian formation, the lead commander, Captain Farhad Nouri, was already noticing it. His patrol craft was doing 58 knots, slamming hard across the flat black water, spray exploding across the forward canopy. He had a radio channel open on the British music frequency. He was waiting for the transmission that always came. The clipped Royal Navy voice, formal and slightly strained, asking him to please maintain safe distance. It didn't come. He checked his radar. Dragon still hadn't altered course. Still 18 knots, straight and steady, like a ship that had decided exactly where it was going and wasn't particularly interested in what was in the way. Norrie felt the first small knot form somewhere in his chest. Something about tonight felt wrong. He pushed the thought aside and accelerated. At 3:21, Dragon's Samson radar shifted modes. It lasted less than 2 seconds. A quiet technical transition deep inside the ship's combat systems. The kind of thing that meant nothing to anyone watching from the outside. But inside every Iranian cockpit within 9 nautical miles, radar warning receivers erupted simultaneously with a sound every IRGC commander immediately recognized. Not surveillance tracking. Not navigational scanning. Music, weapons quality lock. All 8 vessels. Simultaneously. Painted and held. Nouri's hand tightened on the throttle. HMS Dragon had just told them, without a single word on the radio, music, without a warning flare, without any of the diplomatic theater that usually preceded these things, exactly what she was prepared to do. And she had done it so quietly, so precisely, so without any apparent emotion, that it was somehow more frightening than aggression would have been. Because aggression, music, you could answer. Aggression had a script. This had no script. This was a ship that had entered the Strait of Hormuz already ready for war. Nouri didn't stop. Not yet. He keyed his radio and ordered the formation to maintain pressure. His voice came out steadier than he felt. Which was the only thing that mattered right now, because 7 other commanders were listening. And if the lead boat hesitated, their whole operation collapsed before it started. The Iranian formation pushed south, spreading wider as it came. For boats curving around Dragon's port side. For swinging starboard. The classic encirclement geometry that had worked in these waters before. Get around her flanks. Close the gaps. Make the corridor feel smaller and smaller until the British commander had no comfortable direction left. It was a psychological operation as much as a tactical one. And it required the target to feel surrounded. The problem was HMS Dragon didn't behave like a vessel that felt anything. At 3:24, one of the Iranian boats broke from the northern group and accelerated directly across Dragon's bow. Hard and fast, cutting left to right at roughly 400 m ahead of the destroyer's hull. A textbook intimidation pass. Designed to trigger emergency collision alarms, force the bridge team into reactive decision-making, maybe get a panicked course correction on camera. On Dragon's bridge, the collision prediction system triggered automatically. The officer of the watch turned toward Reeves. Reeves didn't move. The Iranian boat screamed across their path, throwing a white wall of spray behind it and disappeared off the starboard side into the darkness. Dragon never altered course by a single degree. The officer of the watch exhaled through his nose and turned back to his display without saying anything. There was nothing to say. The commander had already communicated the ship's position clearly enough, not through words, but through the simple, slightly terrifying act of not flinching. Below decks in the operations room, Lieutenant Hannah Cole was watching something else entirely. The electronic picture coming in from the RAF RC-135 circling high above the Gulf was getting complicated. Iranian coastal radar stations north of the strait had gone fully active in the last few minutes. Not unusual during incidents like this, but the pattern of emissions was wrong. Too coordinated. Too simultaneous. These weren't defensive systems waking up in response to a developing situation. They had been waiting. Encrypted burst transmissions from Bandar Abbas, she said. Operational. Traffic. Coordinated pattern. Reeves absorbed that without turning around. Someone on shore is running this. Yes, sir. Which meant Tehran knew. Which meant this wasn't 8 patrol boat commanders making aggressive decisions in the dark. This was a directed military operation sanctioned at a level that carried real political weight. The fast boats weren't the point. They were the visible part. The part designed to be filmed, to create the confrontation, to generate the footage. Whatever happened tonight would be deliberate on both sides. Cole kept her eyes on the emissions feed and said nothing more. At 3:26, the Iranian radio operator finally broke the silence. The voice came through measured and slow, the kind of deliberate pacing that suggested it had been rehearsed. British warship, you are approaching restricted waters. Alter course immediately. The operations room heard it clearly. Nobody looked at Reeves. They already knew he wasn't going to.